Hey everybody, welcome to our latest, greatest edition of MSP Business School. Today we've got our special guest. It's Dave Cava from Proactive Technologies. But before we speak to Dave, I of course want to say hello to my favorite co-hosts here, Rob Rogers and Tim McNeil. How's the week treating you boys?
Pretty good, my friend. How about you?
Yeah.
Pretty good, pretty good.
Warming up.
I did get a little listener comment, though, that we need to take into account. So today I was talking to somebody who's apparently been checking out our podcast, and they said we speak a little too much about how tough the weather is.
Oh, okay.
So, we got to take weather off the plate, because he said, I live up here in Canada. You guys don't know what bad weather is.
Oh, wow.
So it was a fair poke.
Close, I'm close enough. I am close enough to Canada. I can still use that excuse.
All right. So we'll have to find some new casual banter. But anyhow, okay. Dave, welcome to the show today. Thank you so much for joining us.
For having me.
Yeah.
So the way we love to start things off, Dave, is just learning a little bit about you and some of your backstory so that, the audience can get familiar with what you've done in the MSP space to date.
Well, I used to describe myself as an accidental entrepreneur, and then I realized that I was really the opposite of an accidental entrepreneur. I'm not a visionary. It was not something I was dying to do, but it was something that was in my family background. And when I was at a company where things were going bad, I said, oh boy, I guess it's time for me to start a business. And I kind of backed into it with a lot of fear and trembling. And Proactive Technologies was founded in 2007. We sold it in 2019. So, you introduced that as my company. That it's my I'm an alumni.
Alumni, all right.
And we were heavily focused in financial services, very vertically focused. And I functioned as the COO/CFO. I had a 50-50 partner. And we grew really quickly. We were on the Inc. 5000 7 times.
Nice.
And we did great when we sold. We got a terrific multiple, and there were good reasons for that. So
I'm always curious about the acquisition like that. Did you did you sell to one of these PE-backed platforms, or did you just sell to a private sale, an MSP to MSP?
Well, it was an MSP, but like I said, we were highly vertically focused, and that really allowed us to, when they talk in terms of tactical acquisitions versus strategic acquisitions, if you're a general MSP with general clientele and will sell to anybody, you're one of 1,000 companies, in your region that's available for acquisition. When you're heavily focused on hedge funds and private equities, all of a sudden you're one of 4 or 5. At least at the size we were, which made us an attractive target, and a company that did buy us had private equity backing. It was a large minority stake. So the private equity is minority, but they were holding a lot of the purse strings. So.
Yeah.
Hey, Dave, I got a quick question for you. So when you were preparing for your M&A, was this something that was planned for you? Was this on your roadmap, or did this kind of come out of the blue for you? Like, what was the prep and the strategy that you guys were employing to get there?
Well, I wish there was a lot more prep, because I feel like me back then could talk to myself now to help us add even more value into the company. But, for years we'd said we're not looking to sell. We had a chance in 2014. We got to the point where there was an LOI in front of us. There was a little bit of bait and switch stuff with one of these brokerage companies. And at the end, we just said, not enough of this money is guaranteed. We've got unfinished business here. We're going to walk away. And ever since then, we just said, we're not really considering reasonable offers. However, we will listen to unreasonable offers. And the offer we got was pretty great. The other thing that happened is there were 2 things going on simultaneously. One was that my partner and I both felt like we had really hit a plateau in our business. We were right about $10 million a year, with a run rate of about 6.5 million of that being MRR. And he functioned primarily in sales and oversaw service a little bit. I functioned as COO, CFO, and we were at a point where we knew that we could no longer function as the two-headed dragon.
Yep.
And our company really needed a CEO, and we knew that it probably wasn't either of us. And so either we were going to limp along with the management structure we had, or we were going to bring in someone from the outside, and that would be incredibly disruptive and painful and a major transition. The other thing that happened is that my daughter got cancer. So it got harder and harder for me to work full time, and we wound up traveling all over the world to try and get her treatment. And, it was very providential that we got the offer that we did when we did. There's a pretty good chance I would have been out of the business anyway, just because it wasn't sustainable for me to continue to draw salary and not be there very much. So a lot of things came together there.
It's amazing how divine intervention can come into play sometimes at the right moment.
Oh, you want to hear a story? I'll give you a story.
Yeah.
So
We're here for.
If you imagine this like a soap opera or a bad movie in a split TV screen with two scenes going on simultaneously, as I was signing the papers to sell my MSP, my wife was in the hospital with the oncologist, formally finding out that my daughter had recurred. And those things literally happened at the same exact time. My wife didn't tell me for 2 days. And that's very unlike her. She'd never done it before. And I just said, "You've known us for 2 days?" And she said, "Yes, I just know what a giant milestone that was in your life, and I wanted you to be able to enjoy it a little."
It's amazing. Gave you that 48 hours, and
And
that's a rock star you got there.
yeah, she is. And I said, "Thank you so much for that. That was the right thing to do. Please don't ever do that again."
Hey, so I kind of want to switch it up here for a second, Dave. You grew to it was an off the hand.
Yeah,
just
we're just
grew
going to
to $10
maintain
million
a
in
$10
12
million
years. Not a big deal. Okay, so what's the secret sauce, my friend? We're all waiting here. How did you guys get to that big in that short of time?
Some things that are transferable and principles worth noting, and some of it was just kind of luck. Well, first of all, my partner and I had worked for another company, and we had run a group within a larger consulting company. And so when we split off, there was a lot of people that wanted to work with us. We actually did $1.4 million in revenue in our first 8 months in business. So, I mean, when you talk about getting to 10 million in 11 and a half years, I like to say really, our first year was basically almost like a very successful first 5 years for normal MSP. So there was a little bit of kind of cheating at the starting gate there. But the other thing that really, I think, was the most transferable thing was that the vertical focus was really amazingly helpful for us. Now I'm doing some coaching and consulting, and I like to tell people, and I've been saying this for years, actually, you need to be known as the best at something. Whether that's a technology focus or a business niche focus or a vertical focus, you need to be known as if you need XYZ, you go to that guy, and not be in a position where you're just competing on price with common denominator services and there's really no differentiator. So we got a lot of sales through prime brokerage relationships and just viral things. Our old peer group coach used to say, "So you guys just sit around and wait for the phone to ring?" And we'd say, "Do you know how much we do to make sure that phone keeps ringing?" It was a different sales model.
Yeah.
And it was largely principal-led sales right up to the end. But for us, it was very successful, and the vertical focus was extremely key there. I would say it was most of the key there.
Well, so I had a question about that. I know we've talked offline a few times, and you've said how your business partner was he was doing a lot of the principal-led selling. Like how were you able to maintain? Because it's never really made sense to me. How did you maintain a principal-led selling with the $10 million MSP? We've legitimately never heard that. So did you have
Yeah,
sales
we used to
people in
sit in
the
these
background?
Gary Pica seminars with 150 people in them. And he'd say, how many of you are bringing in $4,500 a month in new MRR? And we'd be the only people in the room with our hands up. Again, first of all, he wasn't doing a lot of other things. Obviously we
I would
evolved the
assume, yeah.
organization. He
Yeah.
was essentially 80% on sales probably.
Mhm.
And we charge very good rates. I mean, another key to our long-term success and a successful acquisition was that we bundled everything. Our last few years in business, we were selling all-you-can-eat support plus platform to the overwhelming majority of our opportunities. That was a common denominator platform that someone else wouldn't have a hard time taking over. A lot of Cisco, a lot of Microsoft. Yeah, the thing with that world that we were in, it's very hard to crack into. You can't just say, hey, you should take a look at us. You have to work very hard to establish your reputation, and you have to work very well to maintain it. And then the deals just flow to you. You're not out doing a whole lot of traditional hunting. So probably almost 50% of our new sales were startup hedge funds being launched by prime brokerages out of incubators and stuff. So.
Wow. And I think you've touched upon something that a lot of MSPs are a little bit frightful to do, and that is that step to vertical, going vertical, because in some cases they might just not have the true subject matter expertise on the backside to go down that route. It sounds like you and your partner had a good understanding of that world when you entered into it, and it's not the same as going, okay, we picked up 6 or 7 healthcare companies, so now we're just going to go entirely healthcare focused. And that's the biggest thing I think I hear from a lot of MSPs, Rob and Tim. I don't know if you hear that from your guys. It's almost, we're going to stay generalist because we're afraid to go vertical, even though we know that if you go vertical, sometimes you can go deep and enhance value. And it sounds like you got that on the exit as well. I don't know if you're seeing the same thing from the people you may have talked to in peer groups, where there's just this resistance to going vertical because there's the fear of A, stopping what's running and working today, even though there could be deeper rewards, and B, can they really sustain and grow in that vertical environment?
Well, there are a couple things there. I mean, first of all, there's a certain audacity to being an entrepreneur, right? I tell people the first step to being known as an expert in something is declaring yourself as an expert in something. And in the MSP world, we should know that better than anybody else, because there's all kinds of people out there that do it. They want to become known as the person for whatever, and if you look at, I won't name the names, but if you look at some of the household names in the industry, they built their legend as they went along. It wasn't established. So, I mean, I tell people, take a look at your client base, take a look at who your best clients are, take a look at if you've got a vein to tap there in terms of the mining metaphor, and make a declaration. And how it went for us is that we had a good in financial services, but it wasn't like it wasn't an amazing in. Like, we thought we'd probably never sell another hedge fund once we started our own company, but we knew some people, and we had a prime brokerage guy we knew from our former company, and he vouched for us. Oh, you guys will do great, and that definitely worked in our favor. But we hit a tipping point where we had to make a decision, and we saw that all these MSPs around us were desperately trying to break into financial services.
Yeah.
To the point where the owners of these companies, some of them more than 50-person companies, were going and running that division themselves to try and sell into financial services, and they weren't having success. And here it was coming easy to us, right? And so we said, all these guys are trying so hard to break into this niche. we're already kind of established in there and seem to have things just flowing to us from that direction. Maybe we should just go with it. And I resisted. I said, I don't want to be pigeonholed. I don't want to turn away
Right.
other business. And over a little bit of time, we came to the conclusion that we could brand ourselves and identify ourselves as a financial services MSP and still get leads that we want to pursue from other places. And the way that went is we would walk into non-financial opportunities and say, hey, we are wired to service hedge funds and private equities. Here's what that means. That means that we are great at the table stake of your network. We build rock solid, redundant, reliable networks that don't go down with good backups and good online file access, highly secure firewalls. We're really good at that, and we're really good at dealing with your pain in the butt people with lots of needs, with the house in Aspen, the house in the Hamptons, and the house in Manhattan. Basically what we're not really good at is learning your law firm software or your manufacturing software or your Linux-based application. We don't know any of that stuff. We don't want to know any of that stuff. If you're looking for bargain basement prices, that's not us. No, we're not changing our plans for you. No, we're not changing our rates for you. If we've got a love connection and what we offer sounds good, awesome. And we go in there and say, we're vetting you just as much as you're vetting us. And we'd set ourselves up there as a premium option. And for certain companies, like we had an advertising firm, 50-something person firm that had a few partners who were wheelers and dealers, highly successful, multiple homes, lots of devices. And they said, we've tried the companies that specialize in marketing, and they all suck. I don't think we need someone that specializes in marketing because there's no special technology in marketing. I think we need someone that knows how to manage our VIPs and is used to dealing with them. So we actually had a process for that, where when a company had VIPs, they would have dedicated tech people that were different from the tech people for the rest of the account. So if there was a problem with a VIP, it didn't affect the rest of the account. And if there was a problem with the rest of the account, it didn't affect the VIPs. And we could switch out resources like that and keep the account healthy and on track.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, simple to say you guys know how to talk type A, right? Because that's really the personalities you were dealing with out there.
Wow.
It's there's small companies, but there's such a high percentage of VIPs. When you're talking about people who work at hedge funds or private equity people that do deals, it's like half the company is VIPs. So and they're willing to pay good prices for good service, and we all know what's expected of each other.
Yeah, almost like a concierge service in some respects, right? Because you're really
Little
slotting these guys with some dedicated reps. That's interesting.
So I got a question real quick. So you blew up, right? 11 and a half years, you got up to $10 million. That is significant revenue growth. And some people that I talk to, you can grow revenue or you can grow profitability, and it's hard to do both at the same time. Were you able to, how did you manage that? And did that become a problem, or were you able to, manage that successfully?
When I'm working with peer groups these days, I say, there's a lot of things I can help you with because we did them right. And there's a lot of things I can help you with because we did them wrong and we figured out what we did wrong. Okay. So I would say our bottom line was gradually on its way to health when we sold. Mm-hmm. I would not point to our profit model as something to be proud of. I've become a believer in the profit first method, if you're familiar with the Mike McCallowitz book. And I wish we had done that along the way. I also feel like when you look at the story of our company, a lot of the foundations that some smaller MSPs lay from the beginning in terms of having their tools set up correctly, having their accounting set up correctly, having their processes documented. We were brute strength and elbow grease for the first, 7 or 8 years. I mean, until we were $6 million or so. I mean, we were way too big to just be muscling our way through things. Mm-hmm. And we had the last few years we had the business, things were getting increasingly healthy in that regard, but it's so much harder to it's like trying to fix a kid that you've spoiled for 15 years.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we had to turn over a significant amount of our staff. We had to, you know, some things that would have been relatively painless had we done them early on. We had to dig up, you know, these deep roots and try and fix things when we were way further down the road. And it was painful, and it was working and starting to work better when we sold. But to answer your question, you know, I wouldn't brag about our bottom line. We did terrific on our acquisition, we made a good living. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, we weren't in poverty with you know, $10 million in revenue, but you know, our percentage at the bottom is not something that you would, you know, go bragging at conferences about. So, but I would know if I had to do it over again now, I'd know how to. I think
You
we
know how
could
to do
grow
it this time.
faster and with a lot more profitability. So learn the hard way.
All right. So, you know, I know that you've got something that you're brewing on and kind of stewing on right now. So what's the next chapter look like, Dave?
Well, it's funny. You know, Rob kind of set me off with a softball there because we were growing very quickly. And for a while, I became, you know, kind of obsessed about how to scale your company. You know, got into the Rockefeller habits and Vern Harnish, things like that. And I just said, you know, we're scaling our company fine in terms of being able to handle the workload, but we're just not that profitable. You know, what I just talked about, you know, and there's very few companies. As I looked around, I saw a lot of companies that just weren't growing. I saw companies that were profitable, but they stayed small, kind of that maxing out that 10 guys in an owner model where they're $1.5 to $2 million in revenue and pushing 300,000 to the bottom line and living well, you know, which is no problem with that if that's the model you choose. But the companies that were growing, we saw very few of them that were growing aggressively and very profitable. So I decided to try and figure out that what the few I saw growing quickly and being very profitable, what they were doing differently. And the primary conclusion I came to was around how they staff their company and personnel, and specifically that, you know, the way I like to term it now is that their companies were built, not bought. You know, they didn't go, oh my God, we got so much work, I need to go hire somebody, and then go out to the open market and try and hire somebody. They were continually hiring the best talent they could at the entry level, training them from within, and then promoting them from within the company. And it was a long-term play. And it was, they had very sophisticated processes, both in hiring and training. So, you know, I learned all that I could. I'm starting to work on a book, and I am, I think we have fully committed, you know, kind of dipped the toe in the pool. And at this point, I think we've fallen into doing some consulting around hiring and recruiting, and probably starting a full-scale recruiting service for MSPs in the months to come. So I'm excited about that. I'm a little nervous about building something new, but I think there is a great opportunity there because I think it's a major pain point in MSP world. You know, I used to be a facilitator for ConnectWise's Northeast user group.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, we saw you there.
We hung out at those, and for probably about half of those groups, we'd have one breakout session that was kind of like biggest pain points for your company, and personnel would come up every single time, and specifically personnel and hiring. I mean, like it was reliable and predictable, and I just said, you know, in all my years in the business, there's really no one that's effectively helped with this. There's recruiting services that work just like every other recruiting service that most of us have ever seen. You know, that they're expensive, and basically they don't even produce particularly good candidates at particularly good costs. Really, it's a desperation move for most companies because they just don't have time to, and they're desperate. They need people.
Yep.
So.
100%.
Well, I think we are getting near the end of our time here. Timmy, you want to take us into the speed round?
Yeah. So we've just
Here we go,
got,
Dave.
we've
Hope
got
you're ready.
five quick questions, nothing too crazy. So just first thing you think of, basically. First question, text, talk, or Teams?
Let's talk our teams. Text.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if we can talk in person, that's the best. I don't like talking on the phone that much.
Yeah. It's text.
I go lunch, then text.
Yep.
And I'm missing lunch these days, let me tell you.
Music, movies, or TV?
Music.
Every time.
What age do you want to retire?
I don't think I ever want to retire, but I also never want to have to be tied down to an office from 9 to 5 every day. I love working, but I love flexibility and traveling and enjoying life too. So.
Yeah. Very cool. Mac or Windows?
Windows.
Yeah.
I'm allergic to Macs. So.
If you could do anything outside of tech, what would it be?
Oh boy. Well, I love writing and speaking. I always say, I told you I was the opposite of the accidental entrepreneur, where it was a cerebral decision for me. I really feel like I was born to be a teacher, and I accidentally got into entrepreneurship and technology. So anytime I can do some writing and teaching and help people with it, it's very gratifying for me. So.
Very cool. Very cool.
So you hit most of the most popular answers. Our favorite one to hear is that this is a community of people that don't want to stop working. Got to keep the mind going, got to keep in touch with that, and kind of echoing that as well. That's awesome.
Yeah, the key is, for you to control it and it not to control you, and that can be a fine line. So
No doubt.
Yes, we
Yep,
can.
sure. Well, Dave, we really appreciate you being on here and joining us today. For anyone that is looking to get a hold of Dave, we will be including his LinkedIn profile with the podcast. Also, this episode will be on MSPBusinessSchool.com and anywhere you get your podcast. Dave, we really appreciate you being here today. Are there any closing thoughts before we break away?
I just really appreciate it. Anytime. This was too much fun. I guess I like to talk.
Yeah.
Awesome. So when you head into that next chapter, we'll have to have you back, and you're going to have to give us some status on how it's going.
Yeah, for sure.
Definitely.
I'd love to come hang out with you.
All right.
Cool. Thanks for coming on, Dave.
Thanks a lot, man. Really appreciate it.
Take care.
Bye.
All right, take care, sir.